If you watched my last video, welcome back. Otherwise, welcome to my new channel. My name is Florence, I'm 21 years old and I am a computer science student and a very enthusiastic knitter from Cambridge, England. Today I have two finished objects to show you guys, as well as a couple of work in progress pieces. I think this is one of those updates where the work in progress pieces are more exciting than the finished objects, so do stick around for those. Also, you may notice it's only been a couple of weeks since my last upload. I don't know if I mentioned, but my updates on this channel are likely to be quite variable in frequency. I spend half the year at university where I study a lot and knit very little, and also filming is difficult because I always live in a tiny, cheapest room in college, kind of north-facing room, which is very dark. Whereas when I'm at home and everything's nice and it's easy to film, I'm likely to film more updates, as well as my rate of making stuff is just a lot higher as well. I'll start off by talking about what I'm wearing. This is an older piece, but not old enough for it to have been in my Everything I Knit in 2021 video that I know quite a lot of you guys have seen. This is the Anchor Tee by Petite Knit. I knitted it in Knitting for Olive Pure Silk in the shade Cream. I decided to do it because I had these 3 skeins of Knitting for Olive Pure Silk in stash, and I wasn't really sure what to do with them. I knew that it was enough for pretty much any camisole, but I wasn't sure about this particular top because it seemed like the yarn requirement was a little bit more than 3 skeins. It's not the original yarn that the top was knit in, but I figured it would look good. I made the size small because in the picture it looks a little bit more fitted. I'm a pretty similar bust measurement to Petite Knit, so I generally just knit whatever size she's knitted. I think I'm like 1 centimetre or 2 centimetres bigger than her, but generally I'll wear whatever she wears. But I did think that it looks a little bit tighter than what I would want, and so I decided to knit the size small. And the game plan was basically just to keep knitting the body until I ran out of yarn, which I did. I had, I don't know, 2 or 3 meters of yarn left, so that worked out well. I got it out of stash, but it is not too long, but it's definitely not cropped or anything. It's a longer t-shirt, right? And I sort of tuck it in so you can't see it so much, but for me there's a little bit more positive ease than I would like on this one. I'm not sure if I would knit this exact top again, maybe, but I think I'd be more likely to knit maybe the Sunday tee, which I think is very pretty. And if so, I would definitely make the size extra small. So I'd be going more off my measurements than off how it looks in the picture. I think Petite Knit sizing always comes up quite large, with 1 or 2 exceptions that I can think of, so I generally always make the extra small. There is another version of this pattern. I think it's called the Anchor Summer Top, and that one is made on 4mm needles, whereas this one is made on 3mm needles. So there are a couple of different options if you want this look, and you can make it in a way that doesn't take quite so long if you're not up for a big project. But yes, I think I made this in the spring, and I've worn it a lot with jeans, with dungarees. It's just a really great piece, and I would like to have more t-shirts like this because I find I reach them a lot. I will move my hair so that you guys can actually see. It has this really lovely 1x1 ribbed yoke, and it's super beginner friendly. I don't think I made any modifications really to it. I don't think the pattern has short rows. I might be wrong about that, but I don't think it has any, and I didn't add any in. I find it sits fine. It doesn't really bother me at all. So yes, a pattern that I do recommend a lot. My finished objects in this video are exactly my work in progress objects in my previous video. Is that a spoiler? I don't know. So I have 2 things. This is the first. Oh, incidentally, everything for this video I think I've managed to shove into my Petite Knit project bag. I spoke about its surprisingly large capacity last video. That still very much holds. There's a lot of stuff in here, including my iPad, and it's holding everything quite comfortably. So yes, this was a pretty small work in progress when I showed it in the last video. I want to say up to about here. This is the Brigitta bag by Gregorio fibres, and like I said before, I've knit this in drop safran. I think the colour is called Off-White. It's the cream colour anyway. Yes, I knit this in drop saffron with 2 strands held together because I had 6 skeins of it in my stash and I don't like knitting garments in cotton very much. I typically try to avoid it. Cotton blend may be okay, but cotton, I don't really like the experience of it, and I don't really like the finished garment. I don't like how they tend to stretch out. I don't like how little elasticity there is while I'm knitting. It's just not the most enjoyable experience for me. But I wanted to use the yarn, and so I thought that if I wasn't going to make a garment that I'd wear a lot, it would make sense to make a bag. For a bag, it's nice for it to be machine washable. It's nice for it to be a cheaper fibre because it's probably going to get grubby. And I don't care so much about it not meeting gauge exactly or it stretching or anything because the dimensions don't precisely matter that much. So yes, I made the Brigitta bag and I knitted this on 3mm needles. I think the pattern calls for 2.5mm needles. The 2 reasons why I used 3mm needles, I think I mentioned before, were firstly, the yarn combination I was using with the 2 strands of drop saffron, which I think is a heavier fingering weight. I'd say holding them together, it's heading into sort of worsted weight territory, and the pattern calls for a DK. So it was a little chunkier and it would have been really difficult to knit it on 2.5mm needles. The needle size is purposely small for a tight gauge to give the bag structure and really help it hold its shape. It's very dense fabric, which is all well and good, but I think physically knitting it on 2.5mm needles would have been hard, so I went with 3. The other reason I went for the 3mm needles is I wanted to use metal needles, and I had 3mm 100cm circular needles in metal because this project had a knit 4 together and a knit 4 together through the back loop in double-stranded cotton on tiny needles, which was very difficult to do. And I was scared I would damage my really nice C-knit needles. I spoke in my last video briefly about how I did the knit 4 together and the knit 4 together through the back loop. In essence, just look up like easier ways to knit 4 together, and it's easy to adapt that to do a knit 4 together through the back loop. But it's sort of like casting off several stitches over one knitted stitch instead of knitting them all together at once, which is much easier because you're only handling 1 stitch at a time. You never have to put your needle through 4 stitches. But yeah, there's a slightly more detailed explanation of what I did in my last video, I think. I used just over 4 skeins of this to knit the bag, so I still have almost 2 left, which is slightly unfortunate because I have absolutely no idea what I'm going to do with, I don't know, 300 odd meters of cotton. That's just an awkward quantity. But in any case, it feels good to have a lot of it gone, and I really do like this bag. It fits everything I could want it to fit. It fits A4 stuff, and it fits my laptop, which is nice. And hopefully you can see the design. I'll put some more pictures of me holding the bag, styling the bag, or of the bag laid flat so you can get a slightly better look at it on the screen so you can see. It was a pretty quick knit. I was putting it off for a while because I found it was quite hard on my hands compared to knitting with wool, but after the first sort of 4 pattern repeats, I left it dormant for a while and then I finished the entire thing in like a day and a half. So yes, I just had to force myself to actually make an effort, and then it ended up being finished quite quickly. I made the straps quite a bit longer than it said in the pattern. The pattern gave a very short length for the straps, I thought, like shorter than looked good. And I appreciate they're probably stretched with use, but I don't think it'll be too difficult for me to unpick my I-cord end grafts and undo a few rows. And definitely for now, they were too short for me to hold the bag over my arm. Like, I want to carry a bag like this, I think, so that's the strap length that I need. I want to say I knit the straps to 31 centimeters. I might be completely wrong about that, I'm sorry. I also used a 4mm needle for the I-cord, so I went up a needle size for both the bag body and the I-cord edge. The construction of the bag is really nice. It uses a magic cast on and then it's worked bottom up, and then you do all of these triangles separately. And then the way that the I-cords go together, I just think it's really cool, like how there's the different I-cord loops, and then the handles are made of 2 I-cord pieces twisted together. I just think it's a really unusual look and very distinctive. So yes, I'm very happy with this bag. I I think I will definitely use it. Am I desperate to make another? No, absolutely not. The knitting experience was pretty tough, but I certainly am very happy to have it. Now I've just got to figure out something that I can do with less than 2 skeins of drop saffron. If you have any suggestions, let me know. Okay, on to finished object number 2. Again, this was a slightly funny looking work in progress in my last video, but I now have it finished. This is the Simple Bralette by Naked Knit. I knitted it in yarn from colourmart. I think it's a cashmere, but it's not especially soft. It's not scratchy at all, like it's not uncomfortable to wear directly against the skin, but it's not soft to the touch. I don't know if I'm the only person who finds that with yarns. Some yarns, like mohair, I can find quite irritating if they're on my neck or close to my skin, but there are other yarns that are sort of hard, as opposed to being soft, but which I find super non-irritating, and this is one of those, if that makes any sense. I did mention in the last video that the pattern called for... Okay, I'll just sort of briefly talk about the construction without giving too much away, hopefully. You knit these 4 triangles for the front and for the back, and then you put them all onto a circular needle and knit the rest of the body in the round. And it called for provisional cast-ons at the top of all of these triangles so that you can add the straps on afterwards. I did not feel like doing provisional cast-ons. I didn't have any stitch holders, so I was going to have to put them all onto waste yarn, which just seemed like a lot of work, and it was very late at night. So I just did regular cast-ons for all of the triangles, and then I picked up stitches to do the straps and Kitchener stitched them down on the other side. It is called Kitchener stitch, right? Like, that's not just for when you have 2 open ends. I don't know, you know what I mean? I seamed the ends down. It's one of those patterns which sort of more describes how you get the numbers to knit the garment to fit you perfectly, rather than explicitly giving you the number of stitches that you have to use. They do also give you some sort of sample number of stitches for a size small or medium, I don't know what the size range is, but there's also plenty of room for you to calculate your own stitch count so that it fits you exactly. I believe I cast on for the second size and knit the triangles for the second size, and again I did this part up to here for the second size, but then for the ribbing I decreased based on my measurements. As a result, it fits me really well. Like, it's a very close fit without me yet having put any elastic in. I do anticipate as I wear it more and the ribbing stretches out, it won't fit quite so perfectly snugly with no room, but that's okay. I'll put elastic in when I feel like it becomes an issue. I do have some elastic that I can put in, I just sort of have to get around to it. For anyone who is curious, I don't know if it's focused, but that is where I picked up the stitches on the front instead of doing the seamless provisional cast on. It would look more perfect probably if I followed the instructions, but I don't think this is noticeable to anyone but me, and only me when I'm looking up close, and I can't say that it bothers me. I really would like to knit some of these bralettes and bras by Naked Knit in nice soft cashmere yarns. So I'm thinking over the summer I'm going to be in London for a bit, and I might try and pop to some London yarn shops and see if I can get some Cardiff cashmere or something. That would be nice. Cambridge is really not it for yarn shops. Well, there is a yarn shop and it seems lovely, but it's not the type of yarn that I want to knit with necessarily. It has a lot of acrylic and quite a bit of cotton and a few superwash wools. But other than that, there's not really much. So I really struggle to find materials that I want to knit with in that shop. Like, it seems nice, and I do buy things there when possible, but the people who stock that shop have a very different taste in yarn to me. And so when I want some nice sort of non-superwash, natural fibre ball yarns, they don't have a great selection. It's also very colourful. And in case you haven't noticed, I like my yarns neutral in general. So this bra is, I think, going to be a really cute 2-piece set when combined with the skort that I'm going to show you in a moment. They're very similar in colour, and even though the yarns are different, they just look really good together. So that's sort of going to be my dream loungewear set once the skort is finished. So let's speak briefly about this skort. This is not a finished object. However, I have deliberately stopped knitting it at the point where it looks like a finished object so that I can share it in this podcast. So this is my skort. It doesn't yet have a name. I put a post on my Instagram story and I asked people for name suggestions, and I've had some very cute name suggestions. So I'm going to have to look through those and see if any of them especially appeal to me. As you can see, I'm pretty much done with the skirt part of the skort. So my next step is going to be figuring out the inset shorts. I don't know how well it's going to work. I worry that it's going to be a bit bulky, but at the very least, I am super happy with this skirt, and it's actually at a length right now where I feel quite comfortable wearing it without shorts or without matching shorts. Like, I can just wear a pair of nude shorts or a pair of black tights and I feel fine. So at the very least, even if the shorts don't turn out exactly how I want, I have a cute skirt. I have knitted this in Drops Puna. It's a 100% alpaca yarn. I thought it would be quite nice for the skort because it's very sort of drapey and it's also really soft to the touch. And since this was a loungewear piece, that's what I was really looking for. I put this on this morning to take some pictures of it, and I wore it for way longer than I was intending, just as I went around the house doing tasks. So that's a good sign. I think it's going to be super comfy. So it has an elasticated waistband like this, which is pretty nice, and then it has these sort of rib sections which open up. I expect with wear, the rib will open up more and the skirt will become a little bit fuller. I have blocked it, and it's just barely dry, but the rib didn't open up as much as I would have liked it to when I blocked it. It looks fine, but I think it will become a little less close-fitting over time. It's a little bit hard to see, but it does have this sort of slightly flared shape, so the increases speed up at the bottom to give it a sort of ruffly hem. And again, I think this is something that will open up with time. I haven't weaved in all my ends yet, so I apologise. It's just because I've literally just blocked it, and I was really trying hard to get that perfect length where it's short, but it would cover shorts, and I feel comfortable wearing it, but also it has to be short because it's a skort, and there's a sort of specific short skort length that I wanted to achieve. And I have to say, I think it ended up being absolutely perfect. I really love it. Can you tell I'm just buzzing about this? I think it's so cute, and I haven't seen any pattern exactly like it, so I'm really happy with it. My one concern is with the yarn choice. I think that this is getting quite heavy. I want to say I've used about just over 4 skeins of the alpaca wool yarn so far. So it's weighing a solid like 250 grams right now. I can do maths. I dropped out of my maths degree, for anyone who's not in the loop. And there are still shorts to go underneath, although I think there'll be quite a lot less fabric for the shorts since they will be tight fitting, so I don't need to put all of this sort of extra fabric in. We'll see. I think it will be fine, but I might have to rethink and look for some lighter weight yarns. I knit this on 3.5mm needles. I didn't feel up to attempting to knit a skirt on 3mm needles, that seemed like a hassle, but I wanted it to still be quite lightweight. So I wanted to use a yarn that I know comes up as a slightly lighter DK, and also since it was ribbing, I really wanted to make sure that it didn't end up too transparent or look too messy, and I think the 3.5mm needles worked really well. So I used that needle size for both the waistband and for all of the pleats. I've written down how I plan on tackling the shorts. I feel like it's probably going to work, but we'll just have to wait and see. In any case, this is the next thing I'm going to be getting finished. I did take a few days off working on it because of it needing to dry. But after this, I'm going to pick up the stitches, knit the shorts, and then I'm pretty fast and I'll write out the pattern soon, so there'll be a testicle quite soon, I think. I'd like to be able to release the pattern for autumn, and it's a little bit of a slow knit, so I want to make sure that anyone who's testing it has plenty of time to do so. So yes, that's the skort. That's the bralette and the skort together, so you can see how scarily good the colour matches. I'm so sorry about my phone constantly going off, that's really rude. But yes, you can see how scarily good the colour matches for being 2 unrelated yarn brands that I bought on 2 separate occasions without trying to match the colours at all, just because I thought both of the colours seemed nice. Clearly there's a type of colour that I like to wear, and it's a muted mid-brown. Okay, so this next work in progress. This is a piece that I have wanted to knit for probably more than a year now, a very long time. It is the Carrelia Sweater, and I might be pronouncing that wrong, I'm very sorry to say, by Midori Hirose. It is a jumper which uses a really different form of colour work. I think it says in the pattern that it's a traditional Estonian technique. I'll show you the swatch that I made. So it has these really lovely flowers and they're sort of formed, it looks like it was embroidered afterwards, right? But in actuality, you weave the contrast coloured yarns in as you knit it. It's really a lot of fun to do, and I've thought that it looked really beautiful, so I've been wanting to make it for a long time, and I finally decided now's the time. The weather is cooling down a little bit, but it's still summer weather, and a lightweight jumper like this would be lovely to work on and lovely to wear. So, where do I start? This jumper is, I believe, supposed to have a 20 stitch gauge and is fingering weight on 4.5mm needles. That is a very open fabric, and I don't necessarily like the look of that. It's just a personal preference thing. I think all of the versions that have been knitted up in the Ravelry projects page, they look lovely, but I'm from the UK and it's cold, and if I'm going to wear this in the autumn, I need it to be a little bit more dense than that. So I did a couple of swatches. The yarn that I'm using, this base yarn, is Pernilla by Filcolana. I believe it's the same Peruvian Highland wool as is in their Filcolana Peruvian Highland wool yarn, which is very popular and which I've used a lot. This is, I guess, a sport weight. It sort of feels like a sport weight. It's definitely a little bit big to be fingering, but I wouldn't say that it's a DK. So for me, that's sort of the compromise, and I knitted this swatch with the sort of sport weight Filcolana Pernilla on 4.5mm needles, and I got gauge. It does look okay, like you can't really see my hand through it or anything, but it's still quite open, and it makes my stitches look a little bit messy as well. So I did another swatch. I'm not even going to show you a close-up on this, it's not worth showing. It's just a tiny swatch of Filcolana Pernilla on 4mm needles. This does not meet gauge, but I really liked the fabric. So, like I said, I'm a maths dropout. I can totally figure out how the gauge is going to affect sizing to the best of what I can get my head around. I think that if I knit the size M1, it's the pattern which has two different size mediums. There's a smaller medium and a larger medium. I calculated that if I knit M1, which is the smaller medium, then I think I will get somewhere between an extra small and a small, which is what I want. So I am knitting the size M1 on 4mm needles. I will talk briefly about the contrast colours that I'm using. So the pattern calls for yarns from Cocon, and it calls for a chunky mohair, which is quite a specific yarn. I feel like there aren't that many brands that do a chunky mohair. You can actually get the Cocon chunky mohair in mini skeins, which is super useful, and they're like £3, so it's a good deal. But I would have to have made a dedicated order from an online store because they weren't available anywhere that I usually shop. And so I didn't really feel like doing that. So I went around Cambridge. Like I said, there's almost nowhere to buy a yarn in Cambridge. There's a acrylic heavy small yarn shop, and then there's John Lewis. And I went to John Lewis and they have Rowan yarns. I don't tend to work with yarn from Rowan unless it's pretty heavily on sale because I feel like it's just a bit expensive for what it is. Maybe that's unfair. They do have some nice, good value yarn, but definitely I think the prices are up there. And I'm a student, so I don't have a lot of money. But since I just needed one skein of each colour, I think it calls for about 15 metres of the leaf colour and about 6 metres of the flower colour in total. So if you have scrap, by the way, this is a perfect time to use your scrap. A lot of the versions of this jumper that I've seen on Ravelry use different colours for each flower and each leaf, or alternate flower colours, and they look gorgeous. So if you have green, pink, yellow scrap yarn, that's great. I quite literally do not have any because everything that I knit is beige or cream or grey, and they're not really flower colours. Now that I think about it, a grey and beige version of this with all different grey and beige flowers would have been beautiful. But I wanted to use some colour, and for me this is a sort of easy, small amount of colour that I can work into my wardrobe, which won't make me feel uncomfortable, but it did mean that I had to go and buy dedicated yarn. So I wanted something with a hairy texture to sort of resemble this chunky mohair. And what I found was these. This is Alpaca Classic by Rowan, and it's a cotton yarn, has a cotton core, and then it has these sort of alpaca fibres surrounding it. I don't know if you can see what the texture is like. It's quite lovely actually. I think I'd really like to knit a sort of cardigan or something from this. I think I'd have the issues I normally have with knitting with cotton in terms of the amount of stretch the yarn has, but the alpaca fibres give it that sort of fuzzy, soft focus look, which I think is really lovely. So these colours I think are willow and hyacinth, but I'm not 100% sure. I wasn't sure how this would work because, like I said, it has next to no elasticity, and so I was worried that putting that into the yoke would affect the way that the yoke sits. However, if you look at this, the weaving in of the contrast colours isn't especially tight. Like, there's quite a lot of slack both on the front and on the back. So I wasn't convinced that it lacking stretch was going to cause issues. In any case, I'm trying it out and I'll get back to you on how it works. I really do like these colours. I really wanted to do alternating flower colours, but like I said, I was going to have to buy a new skein of yarn for every flower colour. There are 9 flowers on the yoke for at least the smaller sizes, and so I could have done 3 different flower colours and it would have been so lovely, like a pink and a blue and a yellow. But yes, I didn't feel like buying more of these. So maybe at some point in the future, I'll either do a neutral one or one with all different colours of flower. So, with all of that out of the way, here it is. I will say in advance, this is desperately in need of a good block. It's looking very lumpy, and also I have quite a short cable through it at the moment, so I can't really spread it out properly. But this is what it's looking like. So you can see it has these flowers all the way around the yoke. They look lovely. The collar, I think it called for like a 1x1 rib with twisted pearls to make it a little bit neater, but I just went for a half twisted rib. I don't know, I haven't done a twisted rib in a while, and I felt like it would look really nice with this sort of delicate, lightweight jumper. So yes, twisted rib collar, this beautiful yoke. I will say I'm using, because I'm using this cream yarn, everything shows up, including all of the increases above the flowers. So I'm hoping it will sort of block out and smooth out a bit and look better. Fingers crossed. But they're always going to be slightly more visible than if I'd used a darker coloured yarn. The construction of this is, it's one of those patterns where it's a circular yoke at the top and when you're working the motif, and then below that it does switch into using raglan increases. So I wanted to divide the body and sleeves so that I could show it to you a little bit more easily in this video, and I managed to do that, and I've actually knit, I don't know, what is that, like 10 centimetres of the body? Probably halfway to starting the ribbing, which is quite exciting, just since yesterday. Anyway, I think it is so beautiful. I love the colours, I love the cream jumper. The sleeves for this, I think they're supposed to be, is it called a bishop sleeve? Like it's a shorter, straight sleeve, I think, and then it pulls in and it has quite a long ribbed cuff. I generally go for a very straight sleeve without any rapid decreases above the cuff. Pretty much whatever I'm knitting, I just switch straight into ribbing with however many stitches I happen to have on the needle. It's just the style of sleeve which I enjoy the most. I don't know whether that'll be what I do here. I was knitting it this morning and this thought crossed my mind. I was like, what if I do a shorter sleeve? I don't have a jumper with a shorter sleeve, and because this one is a little bit sort of more lightweight than lots of jumpers I have, and I could potentially wear it in slightly warmer weather, I could do a bracelet length or even slightly shorter sleeve. I don't know, I'm thinking about it. I favourited a really nice version of the Fortune sweater by Petite Knit on Ravelry the other day, which had those sort of shorter sleeves, and I just thought it looked really elegant, so now I can't get that out of my mind. So I'll finish the body while I'm thinking about what I'm going to do with the sleeves. This is a pretty affordable project, I'd say. I bought 6 skeins of the pernilla. They're like £3.50 each. It's a very affordable yarn, and it's really lovely and very soft, almost too soft for my taste. If you have knitted with the Peruvian Highland wool, feels exactly the same. I think it has a worse colour selection, or at least where I was buying it, there was a pretty small colour selection compared to the Peruvian Highland wool and compared to some of the other filcolana yarn options. But there were enough colours for me to choose a pretty cream at least. And a significant amount of the cost came from buying these two at probably £7 each or something. So if you could eliminate that, if you already have scrap yarns in stash, it's really affordable. The other nice thing about these yarn, and by the way, I held this double for the colour work. The mohair is chunky. This is, I'd say, I think it's listed as a DK, but it's a pretty light DK. Like, you probably would want to knit it on 3mm needles if you wanted something slightly more opaque. So I held it double for both the leaves and the flower to give the effect I wanted. I could possibly have held it triple for the flower, but I think it's fine. The pattern is making me rethink everything right now. It's very, very well written. It's a beautiful pattern. It's explained super clearly. It's divided up into sections in a really intuitive way. It's got lots of great diagrams that give you a good overview of the piece. It's got tables with stitch counts. It has really good photographs, not a load of like decorative pictures, but it has sort of pictures of the back of the work to show you how to weave your ends in, all kinds of stuff like that. I think it's a wonderful pattern. I haven't ever knitted a Midori Hirose pattern before. I'm not a ranunculus gal. I don't really like it. Don't sue me. I mean, it's fine. I could totally make one that is cute and I'd wear it, but it's not top of my list. But this I'm really enjoying, and I'm going to have to go through her patterns and see if there's anything else that really speaks to me. There are a couple that I think are quite pretty and are on my list, so maybe more Midori Hirose patterns coming soon. That means I might be knitting like cables or more colour work, which is not like me. I think that's about everything I had to say about this one, but it's beautiful. I love it. I am pretty sure this will be a finished object by the next video. I'm not going to hang around with this one. So my last work in progress, I think calling it a work in progress is sort of pushing it a little bit. I don't really know how you guys feel about me including pieces like this in this video, in that I haven't started knitting it yet, but I thought it might be sort of interesting to show work in progress pieces even if they're not yet on the needles, so you can sort of understand my process a bit more, because a significant proportion of the lifetime of my pattern development is spent thinking and drawing and knitting swatches. So, since it's the summer and I tend to knit a season ahead, meaning now I'm wanting to work on autumn and winter knits ready for the winter, I have been thinking about how I want a jacket. I feel like having ribbon ties, not ribbon, but you know, ties rather than buttons, is quite trendy at the moment, and I've always thought it's really pretty. I don't know if I'm the only person who has a thing about stuff that doesn't fasten with zips. Like, I like a good tie waist or a button or something that's not a zip, and ties especially I just think are really cool. So I wanted to do a jacket which has ties at the front. I did a couple of drawings which I will show you. Ooh, it's a bit reflective. So you can see these two different jacket designs, and this one here with the collar and the two ties I really like. So since it's a jacket, I wanted it to be more structured. Like, I wanted it to be properly differentiable from a cardigan. So I wanted a texture that feels more dense and will let less wind through, and a heavier yarn. So I started knitting some swatches. What I immediately felt drawn to was a linen stitch, like a 2-colour linen stitch. So I have here a couple of swatches. You're not going to see this. These are both 2-colour linen stitch, but because I've used a cream and a grey, it's a little hard to even see what's going on. It was clearer when they were damp, so I took some pictures because it made the grey a lot darker. I think this one is using the contrast colour on 1 row out of every 4. And this one is 2 rows of the main colour, 2 rows of the contrast colour. I'm still not sure which I prefer. I feel like if I do a higher contrast main and contrast colour, then maybe this one with 1 every 4 rows would look better. And if the 2 colours are closer, I sort of like the tweedy effect you get from doing 2 rows of one colour and then 2 rows of the other. So these are just knit in Drops Nepal, which I had left over from my step-by-step sweater. I don't know if that's what I'm going to be using. I might use something like that because it's going to require a lot of yarn, and that would make it a more affordable project, because I always feel a bit bad. Even if a project means a lot to me and I'm prepared to spend a lot on getting yarn for it, I sort of feel bad recommending very expensive yarn for a project because nobody is going to buy the recommended yarn. So it sort of makes sense if I'm going to need loads to go for something cheap, like Nepal or Alaska by Drops. I also have some other pretty affordable yarns. I have some filcolana by We Are Knitters sitting around, which I bought before the whole We Are Knitters saga. I know some people aren't so in support of them now. I also have quite a bit of Sandnesgarn Fritidsgarn. Sorry for butchering the pronunciation. It's their sort of chunky, heavy yarn, chunky weight yarn anyway. Again, I have 1 colour of each of those, so I have to buy a contrast colour, and they're both almost black in colour. So yes, it's going to be one of those yarns, I think. And I also knit another swatch. This was more of an experiment on increasing, because I want a sloped shoulder on it, I think. So this little swatch has a sloped shoulder. It's like a very tiny jacket look. Here is my shoulder. And also picking up stitches plus an I-cord bind off. And this is a little bit high contrast. The cream is the Nepal, and then this is, I think this is a Drops Alaska. It wasn't labelled, it was a loose skein I have in stash, but I know that I have a lot of loose various shades of brown of Drops Alaska because I've made some multicoloured striped brown and beige stuff before. So yes, this seems promising to me. I'm confident that I feel comfortable constructing the piece. I don't yet know how it'll look, I don't yet know what yarn I'll be using, but hopefully more of that will be coming together by the next episode. I have 1 acquisition. I'm doing quite well at not buying so much yarn. I mean, I guess the contrast colours for the Carrelia were new, but anyway. I couldn't resist this because No Frills Knitting had a sale on a bunch of yarn, including a lot of Sandnesgarn yarn, and it included this gorgeous beige colour of Cos by Sandnesgarn. It's a blown yarn, so it has a synthetic mesh tube, and then I think it's mostly alpaca that's blown through it. I don't tend to reach for yarns like this. I don't feel like I like how they wear. Like, they look beautiful, they're very soft, they look beautiful when I first knit them up, and they're very lightweight, so it tends to be quite affordable because this is an Aran weight yarn, and yet there's 150 meters per 50 grams. So even if it feels very expensive when you look at the price of a single ball, it actually doesn't add up to so much when you work all the way through the jumper. But I find that it sort of wears in a way I don't find very appealing, and also I find sometimes you can feel the synthetic core, the sort of mesh tube that's blown through. I know some brands do a yarn like this with a cotton core instead. I guess it would be kind of similar to this, although this is less of a mesh, I think. But definitely Drops Air is a very cheap similar yarn to this, and that one has a synthetic core too. Anyway, I have a couple different possibilities what I want to do with this. It was about half price. I think I spent like £3.50 per ball on this, which is a very, very good deal. And I got 5 of them, which is probably not enough to knit a jumper on their own. However, the cardigan number 7, I believe it is, by My Favourite Things Knitwear, I think that would work using 5 of these held with a mohair. And the other option that I was considering is maybe making a back. I'm not sure about that, we're going to see how it goes. I'm going to experiment with some different yarns. Maybe this will end up being the thing. Maybe the cardigan will. In any case, it's exactly the type of colour I wear all the time, and the cardigan number 7 has been on my to knit list for a while. It's a very plain, simple cardigan, or to be honest, I might self-draft something which is a similar gauge, slightly different style as well. That could be an option, because seeing the yarn estimates for that cardigan made me feel like this would be enough. In any case, I am not overly concerned about dye lots compared to other people, and so if I have to buy an extra skein, so be it. So yes, that is my singular. I think that's just about everything for today, so thank you very much for watching, and I really hope you enjoyed this episode. I'll be back again probably too soon with another, because like I said, I'm at home, I don't really have uni work to do, I feel so free, I can miss a lot. And goodbye.